Looks like we are live. It's 7 o'clock. It's Monday. Erica's already here after a weekend break. You had company on Friday, right? How was that? Did you guys have a good time? You got the day right. I don't know if that counts. Did you get the day right? Did you really? You got the day right second try. All right. Second time's the charm. The churm. Second time's the churm. Very nice, but they had to leave first thing in the morning because one of them had a sore throat. Ugh. That's not swell. Hopefully just a sore throat. Look who I see. Hello. How are you doing tonight, Barb? It is chaos o'clock. Oh, hey, the Sharkies are here. Oh, can you guys? Oh, yeah. I'm trying to bribe him into being happier about this setup, about me sitting here and talking to you guys. How was my weekend? It was pretty good. Let's see. Went and saw a movie in a movie theater. We tried to be pretty safe about it. So that was fun. We went and saw Suicide Squad. Yeah, I'm sorry. Um, it was very entertaining, but not for kids. There was a lot of cussing and a lot of gore. Yeah, it was messy, but it was fun. It was a good movie. Um, Definitely better, I think, than the first iteration from like 2016 or something like that. Um, what else did we do? Yeah, it. I mean, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn was in both of them, um, and like the character of Amanda Waller was played by the same person, and I guess also Rick Flag. So I think there were four characters, four characters that kind of carried over between them that I can think of. Um, yeah, that's the fourth. I mean, the franchise, the series lends itself well. Hello, Chronically Snail. Um, the series lends itself well to swapping out actors and characters and things because it's not about necessarily anyone in specific. It's about a team of criminals that are forced to go off and complete missions, so they can swap them out. Farmhouse is having trouble getting those letters in the right order. Hello, hello, hello. So I have two pieces of art to show off today. One of them I will show now, and one of them a little bit later because it pertains to the chapter we're about to read. First one here is from one of our Sharky friends, Mr. John. I think everyone can probably recognize this scene. I love the some of the details in here. The giant eyes. John was talking about planning on getting the color in, so I'm looking forward to seeing the green fire in Gollum's eyes. And I like the over this side, the island in the background in the lake. Let's see if I can center it a little bit more. And Gollum's little boat there, and Bilbo is just about to figure out to ask the question about what's in his pocket. So that'll go up on the wall after the stream's done. We'll find a spot for it up here somewhere. I think it'll look good. And I've got one more piece to show off, but like I said, that'll be a little bit later. It's 5 past right now. We'll get to the The other one is from our friend Mia. Thank you very much, the both of you, for sending it to me. And I'm looking forward to showing the other piece as well. So why don't we talk about the previous chapter, what Erica missed out on while she was hanging out with friends. Where did we... So, Erica was here for the actual riddles portion of Riddles in the Dark, right? I'm pretty sure we basically finished that up. The wall of Sharky art, yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to get a little bit of variation up there. Mix Snail. Chronically Snail, when are you gonna send me something? Erica says yes. Okay, so you were here for the riddles. So after the riddles were done, and Gollum was filled with a murderous rage upon suspecting correctly that Bilbo had acquired his ring, even if Bilbo didn't exactly steal it. Kinda did, though, didn't he? I mean, he found it, but then when he figured out who the owner of it was, he didn't give it back. At that point, said owner was trying to murder and eat him, so I guess it's a little bit just justified. But Bilbo decided that, maybe it's time to run away, even if I don't know where I'm going. So he took off up the tunnel with Gollum in hot pursuit, eyes glowing green fire in the dark, and then Bilbo tripped on a rock and fell, and the ring slipped onto his finger, and he landed on top of his sword, which is good because it hid the glowing light from it, I suppose. And Gollum, despite being able to see in the dark, ran straight past him. And Bilbo didn't know exactly why at that moment, but decided to follow, and hoping that Gollum thinking that Bilbo knew where the exit was, Bilbo not knowing, but following Gollum to the exit, and then heard Gollum muttering about how Bilbo must have figured out the secret of the ring and how it could turn someone invisible. And getting close to the exit, but not willing to go to the exit because of the goblins guarding it, and Gollum no longer having the ring to go invisible himself. So Bilbo leapt over him in the dark and dashed for the exit, dodging all sorts of goblins in the process, getting stuck in the exit, which was partly closed, and eventually squeezing through, losing a bunch of buttons in the process, which the goblins scooped up. And then he made his way down the mountainside, was just about to decide to go back to try and find and rescue his dwarven friends, his poor buttons, when he heard said dwarves speaking with Gandalf, who Gandalf was insisting that they go back and rescue Bilbo. The dwarves were less convinced about that, and Bilbo snuck invisibly into their midst and appeared, and they all respected him a great deal more because of it, because he snuck up on them and escaped from everything himself. And then they decided to try to escape because they were fearing that the goblins would come out under cover of darkness. The goblins don't like sunlight very much because it makes them feel dizzy and makes their legs wobbly. Unfortunately, they've lost their ponies and their gear and their food and anything they weren't carrying on them, so they do have a few of their weapons, which they stole back when Gandalf rescued them. And that's about where we're at. We were partway through the chapter Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire. I figure we'll read through this chapter, we'll see where we're at when it's done, and either try to power through the next chapter and finish it, or just stop at the end of this chapter and try and finish on a chapter break, because I keep leaving off halfway through chapters at this point, which, Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire. I like Riddles in the Dark. I think Riddles in the Dark is a very evocative chapter title, but yeah, Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire is definitely a solid one. I don't know. It's definitely a well-known phrase. I wonder... Yeah, iconic. I wonder whether... I'm sure Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire must have been a common phrase prior to the release of this book. I doubt it's the book that made it as iconic, as well known as it is, but That'd be interesting to look into. How does my wizard hood look? I'm not wearing the hat today, but I figured there was some magic to come, so I should, I don't know. It doesn't fit around my massive hair too well, does it? You'll Google it? Alright. Get on that research. Let us know your findings. Oh, hey. I didn't notice Robot Kyo show up. Hey. Good evening. Did everybody have a, hey, yo. Did everybody else have a good weekend? Anything interesting happen? I know, it's very old. Yeah. It's not surprising to me. It seems there's an Aesop fable. Okay. I would guess that I've read that. I've got I've got a big book of fairy tales. Although I think that's mostly Brothers Grimm. I have this neat book that is this like massive book of fairy tales, and it's got one fairy tale for every day of the year. And then it also and the like I think the first one of each month is a longer one, like that's a few pages long. Some of them are just like a few paragraphs long, but that one's kind of neat. Yeah, I really like. I mean, I've had it since I was a kid, and it's got some of the like iconic ones, including some of the really grim ones about like the Matchstick Girl or the Dancing Shoes, which I think are fairly well known, but aren't exactly. They're probably a little bit toned down in their grimness. I don't think but not by much. Like they still have bad endings to some of them. All right, so let's see. Rokio logged in 5 minutes early and started playing the last stream, and you thought that you forget it starts at 6. Told a Jakarta fable for your storytelling class. I remember you telling. Oh yes, I remember the fart story. Classic fart story. All right. Well, on that note, why don't we continue with where we're at in Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire, if everybody is ready. And like I said, we'll get through that and then see where we're at. We'll see. I wouldn't bank. I wouldn't bet on it. I'm gonna take the hood off. That's okay with everyone. All right. So. Where we left off, there was no wind that evening to bring even a sea sighing into the branches of the trees. "Must we go any farther?" said Bilbo, when it was so dark that he could only just see Thorin's beard wagging beside him, and so quiet that he could hear the dwarves breathing like a loud noise. "My toes are all bruised and bent, and my legs ache, and my stomach is wagging like an empty sack." "A bit further," said Gandalf. After what seemed ages further, they came suddenly to an opening where no trees grew. The moon was up and was shining into the clearing. Somehow it struck all of them as not at all a nice place, although there was nothing wrong to see. All of a sudden, they heard a howl away downhill, a long, shuddering howl. It was answered by another away to the right and a good deal nearer to them, and then by another not far away to the left. It was wolves howling at the moon, wolves gathering together. There were no wolves living near Mr. Baggins' hole at home, but he knew that noise. He had had it described to him often enough in tales. One of his elder cousins, on the Took side, who had been a great traveler, used to imitate it to frighten him. To hear it out in the forest under the moon was too much for Bilbo. Even magic rings are not much use against wolves, especially against the evil packs that lived under the shadow of the goblin-infested mountains, over the edge of the wild, on the borders of the unknown. Wolves of that sort smell keener than goblins, and do not need to see you to catch you. "What shall we do? What shall we do?" he cried. "Escaping goblins to be caught by wolves," he said, and it became a proverb, though now we say, out of the frying pan into the fire, in the same sort of uncomfortable situations. Well, there you have it. I was asking where that saying came from, and it's right here in the book. It came from Bilbo escaping goblins to be caught by wolves. Just had to read a page further. "Up the trees, quick!" cried Gandalf, and they ran to the trees at the edge of the glade, hunting for those that had branches fairly low, or were slender enough to swarm up. They found them as quick as ever they could, you can guess, and up they went as high as ever they could trust the branches. You would have laughed, from a safe distance, if you had seen the dwarves sitting up in the trees with their beards dangling down, like old gentlemen gone cracked and playing at being boys. Fili and Kili were at the top of a tall larch, like an enormous Christmas tree. The larch. Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, and Gloin were more comfortable in a huge pine with regular branches sticking out at intervals like the spokes of a wheel. Bifur, Boffer, Bomber, and Thorin were in another. Dwalin and Bali had swarmed up a tall, slender fir with few branches and were trying to find a place to sit in the granary of the topmost boughs. Boughs? Gandalf, who was a good deal taller than the others, had found a tree into which they could not climb, a large pine standing at the very edge of the glade. He was quite hidden in its boughs, but you could see his eyes gleaming in the moon as he peeped out. And Bilbo? He could not get into any tree, and was scuttling about from trunk to trunk, like a rabbit that has lost its hole and has a dog after it. "You've left the burglar behind again," said Nori to Dori, looking down. "I can't always be carrying burglars on my back," said Dori. "Down tunnels and up trees. What do you think I am, a porter?" "He'll be eaten if we don't do something," said Thorin, for there were howls all round them now, getting nearer and nearer. "Dori," he called, for Dori was lowest down in the easiest tree. "Be quick and give Mr. Baggins a hand up." Dori was really a decent fellow in spite of his grumbling. Poor Bilbo could not reach his hand even when he climbed down to the bottom branch and hung his arm down as far as ever he could. So Dori actually climbed out of the tree and let Bilbo scramble up and stand on his back. Just at that moment, the wolves trotted howling into the clearing. All of a sudden, there were hundreds of eyes looking at them. Still, Dori did not let Bilbo down. He waited till he had clambered off his shoulders into the branches, and then he jumped for the branches himself. Only just in time. A wolf snapped at his cloak as he swung up and nearly got him. In a minute, there was a whole pack of them yelping all round the tree and leaping up at the trunk, with eyes blazing and tongues hanging out. Let's just go back to the beginning of the chapter here to give you an idea of what it is we're looking at. The lovely illustration. The larch. The larch. Jonathan said the larch at the exact same time as me. I like that we're all on the same page with that one. Number 1, the larch. Number 27, the larch. All right, back to serious mode here. But even the wild wargs, for so the evil wolves over the edge of the wild were named, cannot climb trees. For a time they were safe. Luckily, it was warm and not windy. Trees are not very comfortable to sit in for long at any time, but in the cold and the wind, with wolves all round below, waiting for you, they can be perfectly miserable places. This glade, in the ring of trees, was evidently a meeting place of the wolves. More and more kept coming in. They left guards at the foot of the tree in which Dori and Bilbo were, then went snuffling about till they had smelt out every tree that had anyone in it. These they guarded too, while all the rest, hundreds and hundreds it seemed, went and sat in a great circle in the glade, and in the middle of the circle was a great grey wolf. He spoke to them in the dreadful language of the wargs. Gandalf understood it. Bilbo did not, but it sounded terrible to him, and as if all their talk was about cruel and wicked things, as it was. Every now and then all the wargs in the circle would answer their grey chief all together, and their dreadful clamour almost made the hobbit fall out of his pine tree. I will tell you what Gandalf heard, though Bilbo did not understand it. The wargs and the goblins often helped one another in wicked deeds. Goblins do not usually venture very far from their mountains unless they are driven out and are looking for new homes, or are marching to war, which I am glad to say has not happened for a long while. But in those days, they sometimes used to go on raids, especially to get food or slaves to work for them. Then they often got the wargs to help and shared the plunder with them. Sometimes they rode on wolves like men do on horses. Now it seemed that a great goblin raid had been planned for that very night. The wargs had come to meet the goblins, and the goblins were late. The reason, no doubt, was the death of the great goblin, and all the excitement caused by the dwarves and Bilbo and the wizard, for whom they were probably still hunting. In spite of the dangers of this far land, bold men had of late been making their way back into it from the south, cutting down trees and building places to live in among the more pleasant woods in the valleys and along the river shores. There were many of them, and they were brave and well armed, and even the wargs dared not attack them if there were many together, or in the bright day. But now they had planned, with the goblins' help, to come by night upon some of the villages nearest the mountains. If their plan had been carried out, there would have been none left there next day. All would have been killed except the few the goblins kept from the wolves and carried back as prisoners to their caves. This was dreadful talk to listen to, not only because of the brave woodmen and their wives and children, but also because of the danger which now threatened Gandalf and his friends. The wargs were angry and puzzled at finding them here in their very meeting place. They thought they were friends of the woodmen, and were come to spy on them, and would take news of their plans down into the valleys, and then the goblins and the wolves would have to fight a terrible battle, instead of capturing prisoners and devouring people waked suddenly from their sleep. So the wargs had no intention of going away and letting the people up the trees escape, at any rate not until morning, and long before that, they said, goblin soldiers would be coming down from the mountains, and goblins can climb trees, or cut them down. Now you can understand why Gandalf, listening to their growling and yelping, began to be dreadfully afraid, wizard though he was, and to feel that they were in a very bad place, and had not yet escaped at all. All the same, he was not going to let them have it all their own way, though he could not do very much stuck up a tall tree with wolves all around on the ground below. He gathered the huge pine cones from the branches of his tree. Then he set one alight with bright blue fire, and threw it whizzing down among the circle of the wolves. It struck one on the back, and immediately his shaggy coat caught fire, and he was leaping to and fro, yelping horribly. Then another came, and another, one in blue flames, one in red, another in green. They burst on the ground in the middle of the circle, and went off in colored sparks and smoke. A specially large one hit the chief wolf on the nose, and he leapt in the air 10 feet, and then rushed round and round the circle, biting and snapping even at the other wolves in his anger and fright. The dwarves and Bilbo shouted and cheered. The rage of the wolves was terrible to see, and the commotion they made filled all the forest. Wolves are afraid of fire at all times, but this was a most horrible and uncanny fire. If a spark got in their coats, it stuck and burnt into them, and unless they rolled over quick, they were soon all in flames. Very soon, all about the glade, wolves were rolling over and over to put out the sparks on their backs, while those that were burning were running about howling and setting others alight, till their own friends chased them away, and they fled off down the slopes, crying and yammering and looking for water. "What is all this uproar in the forest tonight?" said the Lord of the Eagles. He was sitting, black in the moonlight, on the top of a lonely pinnacle of rock at the eastern edge of the mountains. "I hear wolves' voices. Are the goblins at mischief in the woods?" He swept up into the air, and immediately 2 of his guards from the rocks at either hand leapt up to follow him. They circled up in the sky and looked down upon the ring of the wargs, a tiny spot far, far below. But eagles have keen eyes, and can see small things at a great distance. The Lord of the Eagles of the Misty Mountains had eyes that could look at the sun unblinking, and could see a rabbit moving on the ground a mile below, even in the moonlight. So, though he could not see the people in the trees, he could make out the commotion among the wolves, and see the tiny flashes of fire, and hear the howling and yelping come up faint from far beneath him. Also, he could see the glint of the moon on goblin spears and helmets, as long lines of the wicked folk crept down the hillsides from their gate and wound into the wood. Eagles are not kindly birds. Some are cowardly and cruel, but the ancient race of the northern mountains were the greatest of all birds. They were proud and strong and noble-hearted. They did not love goblins or fear them. When they took any notice of them at all, which was seldom, for they did not eat such creatures, they swooped down on them and drove them shrieking back to their caves, and stopped whatever wickedness they were doing. The goblins hated the eagles and feared them, but could not reach their lofty seats or drive them from the mountains. Tonight, the Lord of the Eagles was filled with curiosity to know what was afoot, so he summoned many other eagles to him, and they flew away from the mountains, and slowly circling ever round and round, they came down, 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 toward the ring of the wolves and the meeting place of the goblins. A very good thing, too. Dreadful things had been going on down there. The wolves that had caught fire and fled into the forest had set it alight in several places. It was high summer, and on this eastern side of the mountains there had been little rain for some time. Yellowing bracken, fallen branches, deep-piled pine needles, and here and there dead trees were soon in flames. All round the clearing of the wargs fire was leaping. But the wolf guards did not leave the trees. Maddened and angry, they were leaping and howling round the trunks, and cursing the dwarves in their horrible language, with their tongues hanging out, and their eyes shining as red and fierce as the flames. Then suddenly, goblins came running up, yelling. They thought a battle with the woodmen was going on, but they soon learnt what had really happened. Some of them actually sat down and laughed. Others waved their spears and clashed the shafts against their shields. Goblins are not afraid of fire, and they soon had a plan which seemed to them most amusing. Some got all the wolves together in a pack. Some stacked fern and brushwood round the tree trunks. Others rushed round and stamped and beat and stamped until nearly all the flames were put out. But they did not put out the fire nearest to the tree where the dwarves were. That fire they fed with leaves and dead branches and bracken. Soon they had a ring of smoke and flame all round the dwarves, a ring which they kept from spreading outwards, but it closed slowly in, till the running fire was licking the fuel piled under the trees. Smoke was in Bilbo's eyes. He could feel the heat of the flames, and through the reek he could see the goblins dancing round and round in a circle like people round a midsummer bonfire. Outside the ring of dancing warriors with spears and axes stood the wolves at a respectful distance, watching and waiting. He could hear the goblins beginning a horrible song. As I have a little drink. Talking about Binnabik, short people problems, bad puppers, certainly not Binnabik. Magic-looking drink, my potion. Don't know quite what plunder one would share with a warg, but maybe goblins prioritize different things than you do. I think part of the plunder they're sharing with the wargs are, well, the people. Gandalf's fire magic. Raising the union? I'm not sure what you're saying there, Barb, sorry. Where's my little warg? Where's the little warg? Littlest warg. Okay, it's all gone. I'm getting an extended finger licking. Finger licking good. You want to come up? No, he doesn't want to come up. He's looking at me, just in case. Raising the tension. Alright. One more drink before the horrible song. Remember, this is a Goblin song, and it's not supposed to sound good. Alright. He could hear the goblins beginning a horrible song. 15 birds in 5 fir trees, their feathers were fanned in a fiery breeze. But funny little birds, they had no wings. Oh, what shall we do with the funny little things? Roast 'em alive, or stew them in a pot. Fry them, boil them, and eat them hot. Then they stopped, thank you, and shouted out, Fly away, little birds, fly away if you can. Come down, little birds, or you will get roasted in your nests. Sing, sing, little birds, why don't you sing? Applause. Go away, little boys, shouted Gandalf in answer. It isn't bird nesting time. Also, naughty little boys that play with fire get punished. He said it to make them angry, and to show them he was not frightened of them, though of course he was, wizard though he was. But they took no notice, and they went on singing. Burn, burn, tree and fern, shrivel and scorch a fizzling torch, to light the night for our daylight, yah-hey! Bake and toast 'em, fry and roast 'em, till beards blaze and eyes glaze, till hair smells and skins crack, for fat melts and bones black in cinders lie beneath the sky. So dwarves shall die and light the night for our delight. Yah-hey, yah-harry, hey, yah-hey! Yahoy! And with that yahoy, the flames were under Gandalf's tree. In a moment it spread to the others. The bark caught fire, the lower branches cracked. They're very good at improvising songs, don't you think? Then Gandalf climbed to the top of his tree. The sudden splendor flashed from his wand like lightning as he got ready to spring down from on high right among the spears of the goblins. That would have been the end of him, though he probably would have killed many of them as he came hurtling down like a thunderbolt. But he never leapt. Just at that moment, the Lord of the Eagles swept down from above, seized him in his talons, and was gone. There was a howl of anger and surprise from the goblins. Loud cried the Lord of the Eagles, to whom Gandalf had now spoken. Back swept the great birds that were with him, and down they came like huge black shadows. The wolves yammered and gnashed their teeth. The goblins yelled and stamped with rage, and flung their heavy spears in the air, in vain. Over them swooped the eagles. The dark rush of their beating wings smote them to the floor or drove them far away. Their talons tore at goblin faces. Other birds flew to the treetops and seized the dwarves, who were scrambling up now as far as they ever dared to go. Poor little Bilbo was very nearly left behind again. He just managed to catch hold of Dori's legs, as Dori was borne off last of all, and up they went together above the tumult? That's a word that I don't properly know the pronunciation of. I think it's tumult, but I'll have to look that one up. Up they went together above the tumult and the burning, Bilbo swinging in the air with his arms nearly breaking. Now, far below, the goblins and the wolves were scattering far and wide in the woods. A few eagles were still circling and sweeping above the battleground. The flames about the trees sprang suddenly up above the highest branches. They went up in crackling fire. There was a sudden flurry of sparks and smoke. Bilbo had escaped only just in time. Soon the light of the burning was faint below, a red twinkle on the black floor, and they were high up in the sky, rising all the time in strong sweeping circles. Bilbo never forgot that flight, clinging on to Dori's ankles. He moaned, "My arms, my arms!" But Dori groaned, "My poor legs, my poor legs!" One moment. We have here a lovely little bit of art to show off. So we have an eagle up here carrying a dwarf and a hobbit that are moaning, "My arms, my poor arms, and my legs, my poor legs." And way down below here is a fire with all the smoke rising up, and I think you can just see a warg down here. And this is from our friend Mia, of course. The very talented Mia. Mia, you're getting a reputation. Everybody's starting to recognize your work. So that's pretty great. Yeah, there's just a tiny little warg down here. Sad about the fire, I guess. And let's bring it in a little closer so you can see some of the. That's great. The purple hood. I like the attention to detail in the clothes. And the moon up above. So that'll also find its way up onto the, need to go this way. Up onto the wall up there. I'll have that up there for the next stream. I wonder how many other pictures of that exact scene there are out there. I would wager there probably aren't many. At the best of times, heights made Bilbo giddy. He used to turn queer if he looked over the edge of quite a little cliff, and he had never liked ladders, let alone trees, never having had to escape from wolves before. So you can imagine how his head swam now when he looked down between his dangling toes and saw the dark lands opening wide underneath him, touched here and there with the light of the moon on a hillside rock or a stream in the plains. The pale peaks of the mountains were coming nearer, moonlit spikes of rock sticking out of black shadows. Summer or not, it seemed very cold. He shut his eyes and wondered if he could hold on any longer. Then he imagined what would happen if he did not. He felt sick. The flight ended only just in time for him, just before his arms gave way. He loosed Dori's ankles with a gasp and fell onto the rough platform of an eagle's eyrie. It's funny that I know how to say eyrie, but I don't know how to say tumult. Tumult? There he lay without speaking, and his thoughts were a mixture of surprise at being saved from the fire, and fear lest he fell off that narrow place into the deep shadows on either side. He was feeling very queer indeed in his head by this time after the dreadful adventures of the last 3 days with next to nothing to eat, and he found himself saying aloud, "Now I know what a piece of bacon feels like when it is suddenly picked out of the pan on a fork and put back on the shelf." "No, you don't," he heard Dori answering, "because the bacon knows that it will get back in the pan sooner or later, and it is to be hoped that we shan't. Also, eagles aren't forks." It really shouldn't be so funny. It's just, Right here. The wisdom of Tolkien. Eagles aren't forks. Ah, yes, all those times I took bacon from a pan and put it back on a shelf. Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of times that's ever happened. It's so true, though. That is some dwarven wisdom right there. Eagles aren't forks. And don't none of you forget it, alright? Eagles aren't forks. When I get to the point where I can make like custom emotes, when I'm allowed to make custom emotes for Twitch, I feel like that's got to be one of them. Like a picture of an eagle and then like a does not equal and the picture of a fork. Can someone make that for me? I don't think I'm allowed to upload custom emotes just yet. We've got to get a few more followers in, but when we can, eagles do not equal forks. You go for the forks in the drawer and accidentally grab an eagle. That wouldn't be embarrassing. Can you imagine? You got like a plate of spaghetti and you grab this eagle, like, ah, and you, oh, dang it, and it flies off, and now it's covered in tomato sauce and it's flapping around the ceiling. Ugh, what a mess. Those times you go grab a mug and it's bacon. Who put this back in the shelf? This was supposed to get cooked in the pan. Somebody not decided they didn't want their bacon and put it in with the mugs. What a mess. Fistful of bacon and a tomato sauce eagle flying around the ceiling. Ugh. This is what you get for hanging out with dwarves. Okay. Eagles aren't forks, is where we left off. Oh no, not a bit like storks. Forks, I mean, said Bilbo, sitting up and looking anxiously at the eagle who was perched close by. Eagles, also not storks. This is so chaotic, my cat could have written it. One cat on 1,000 typewriters. He wondered what other nonsense he had been saying, and if the eagle would think it rude. You ought not to be rude to an eagle when you are only the size of a hobbit and are up in his eyrie at night. All right, there's our chastisement from the past. Let's stop being so rude to the eagles. Okay, you know what? I kind of need to go back to the beginning of this paragraph. Just get through it in one go. Eagles aren't forks. Oh no, not a bit like storks. Forks, I mean, said Bilbo, sitting up and looking anxiously at the eagle who was perched close by. He wondered what other nonsense he had been saying, and if the eagle would think it rude. You ought not to be rude to an eagle when you are only the size of a hobbit and are up in his eyrie at night. The eagle only sharpened his beak on a stone, and trimmed his feathers, and took no notice. Soon another eagle flew up. The Lord of the Eagles bids you to bring your prisoners to the great shelf, he cried, and was off again. The other seized Dori in his claws, and flew away with him into the night, leaving Bilbo all alone. He had just strength to wonder what the messenger had meant by prisoners, and to begin to think of being torn up for supper like a rabbit, when his own turn came. The eagle came back, seized him in his talons by the back of his coat, and swooped off. This time he flew only a short way. Very soon Bilbo was laid down, trembling with fear, on a wide shelf of rock on the mountainside. There was no path down onto it save by flying, and no path down off it except by jumping over a precipice. There he found all the others sitting with their backs to the mountain wall. The Lord of the Eagles was also there, and was speaking to Gandalf. It seemed that Bilbo was not going to be eaten after all. The wizard and the Eagle Lord appeared to know one another slightly, and even to be on friendly terms. As a matter of fact, Gandalf, who had often been in the mountains, had once rendered a service to the Eagles, and healed their lord from an arrow wound. So you see, prisoners had meant prisoners rescued from the goblins, only, and not captives of the eagles. As Bilbo listened to the talk of Gandalf, he realized that at last they were going to escape, really and truly, from the dreadful mountains. He was discussing plans with the great eagle for carrying the dwarves and himself and Bilbo far away and setting them down well on their journey across the plains below. The Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near where men lived. They would shoot at us with their great bows of yew, he said, for they would think we were after their sheep. And at other times they would be right. No, we are glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repay our thanks to you, but we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southward plains. Very well, said Gandalf. Take us where and as far as you will. We are already deeply obliged to you, but in the meantime we are famished with hunger. I am nearly dead of it, said Bilbo in a weak little voice that nobody heard. That can perhaps be mended, said the Lord of the Eagles. Later on, you might have seen a bright fire on the shelf of rock, and the figures of the dwarves round it, cooking and making a fine roasting smell. The eagles had brought up dry boughs for fuel, and they had brought rabbits, hares, and a small sheep. The dwarves managed all the preparations. Bilbo was too weak to help, and anyway, he was not much good at skinning rabbits or cutting up meat, being used to having it delivered by the butcher all ready to cook. Gandalf, too, was lying down after doing his part in setting the fire going, since Oin and Gloin had lost their tinder boxes. Dwarves have never taken to matches even yet. So ended the adventures of the Misty Mountains. Soon Bilbo's stomach was feeling full and comfortable again, and he felt he could sleep contentedly, though really he would have liked a loaf and butter better than bits of meat toasted on sticks. He slept curled up on the hard rock more soundly than ever he had done on his feather bed in his own little hole at home. But all night he dreamt of his own house, and wandered in his sleep into all his different rooms, looking for something that he could not find nor remember what it looked like. And that is the end of chapter 6, Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire. What's everyone saying here while I was reading? We've gotten over the eagles and forks argument. Prisoners ominous, yeah. Dwarves hang out in mountains, but you usually think of them in, not on them. So, afraid of heights or no? I think that depends on the dwarf. I think I know in the Dragonlance books, there are hill dwarves and mountain dwarves, and I think the same holds true for D&D. There's different types of dwarves that live in different places. So not all dwarves live in the same areas. Wonder if hobbits smell like bacon to those unaccustomed to bacon and or pig. These dwarves specifically. Well, these dwarves specifically, at least some of them used to live in a mountain, but have not for a great many years. So I don't know whether they have grown unaccustomed to it. But yeah, I suppose really none of them were probably ever much good with heights, I would guess. Kind of like how people who live in North America smell like sour milk to those unaccustomed to casual milk drinking. Gross. I've known some people that I have thought especially smelled like sour milk. Not to mention anyone in specific. Am I a bit blurry? Is the camera out of focus? Is there a way that I can... Yeah, it looks like it wants to focus on my hand here. Does Erica smell like sour soy? What? No. No. Sour soy. What would that even... If anything, that would be nice smelling, right? Right? Yeah. Does soy sour? I mean, there's fermented soybeans are a thing. So that's what that is, isn't it? Fermented, sour, similar. Ruh-roh. Not the discussion I was expecting to have at the end of this chapter. Do people smell like sour milk? Do hobbits smell like bacon? The Sharkies. I've been in a mine, and the shafts you can't see down can get very high, and you're scared of heights. So dwarves might be used to that kind. So what the natto? Yeah. Yeah, I've been in a mine shaft or two, though I don't think I've looked down into any holes in mine shafts. Specifically, the Britannia. I think it's the Britannia mine, right? Up the coast a bit. Worked there a couple times. We did some filming there on The Flash. And I think I was also there on Supernatural, but I definitely remember one of the big crossover episodes of The Flash. We had to go there, and I went there both for filming and for one of the scouting trips. It got very cold up there. And also some of us went up there for Halloween. That was fun one year. And some old gold mines that were not sanitized for tourists. Oh, I see. That's a little bit different. Farmouse is not used to, but not really afraid of heights, but don't like depths, like deep oceans. It was very much watch your step. Yeah, that's fair. So we had some more of Gandalf's fire magic in this chapter. The flaming pine cone attack. Whew! Apparently he's a real good shot with a pine cone. When I was a kid growing up in Cultus Lake, one of the pastimes was pine cone fights, throwing pine cones at each other. Probably not the safest activity, especially because, some people went and looked for the pine cones that hadn't opened up yet, the ones that were still packed tight, because those ones you could really get some speed, and those stung when you got hit with them. The first instance of him knowing animal language? Yeah, I suppose so. There hasn't really been too much talk of Gandalf speaking other languages to this point. I mean, I'm sure... I don't remember, did he speak to the elves in their language? I don't remember much of the talk about the elven language, but that might just be slipping my mind at the moment. But yes, the knowing the warg language is especially interesting to me, because I can't imagine that that's a very common tongue in these lands. But again, so I wonder whether that is Gandalf speaks the language, or Gandalf has some ability to speak all languages through his magic. It's not really mentioned, because I thought it was very bold of Gandalf to mock the goblins for playing with fire when he was the one who started the fire. Well, okay, but what Gandalf was saying was that naughty little boys shouldn't play with fire. Obviously, Gandalf is not a naughty little boy. He's a wise wizard. He might have been safe. And it did say he was trying to make them angry, so... But yeah, a little hypocritical, maybe. Poor puppers getting set on fire, even if they were evil man-eating puppers. But yes, the wargs being is this also... Have there been any other instances of intelligent animals up to this point? Because we've had, like, ponies. What other animals have there been, really? They were just hungry. We've had the ponies, we've had goblins, we've had giants, we've had elves. Goblins and Gollum. There was mention of fish. The fish didn't talk to anybody. But the wargs being, intelligent, and then the eagles, both of them being capable of speech. Why do I feel like Farmouse is setting up for a pun here? Oh, okay. Not setting up for fun. No, no. Yes. I think it might be. No, nothing. That was it. um, but yeah, a little bit of a shift in tone, I think, at through this past chapter regarding animals, and there might be a little bit more of that to come. We won't get into it tonight, but the next chapter, Queer Lodgings. Some artwork of a certain someone there with some horses. Yeah, there's just so many, like, I feel like there are very few chapters in this book that don't have something interesting to look forward to. There's just so much, like, it's packed so full of neat moments and neat characters. So, it's just a really good book, yeah. Yeah, agreed, of course. So, is there anything else in this chapter? I mean, the dwarves didn't do much except for run away and then climb up trees out of fear. Um, really, I guess the main action takers in this chapter were the wargs and the goblins and Gandalf and the eagles. What's Dori's deal with Bilbo? It's highlighted again how much smaller hobbits are than dwarves. Yeah, that's also an interesting thing. They don't actually talk much about the dwarves seeming very small in this book. I feel like they are supposed to be shorter than men, but I think because Bilbo is along for the ride, Bilbo ends up being the short one, and the dwarves are all just kind of average height. I'm sure they mentioned at some point exactly how tall the dwarves tended to be, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Were they in like the 5 foot range of height? Because if so, there are people that short. I mean, that height. But I don't remember if they are shorter than 5 feet in Middle Earth. Dori does have to deal with him all the time, carrying him, being blamed for not having him during the cave. Yeah, it does kind of seem like Dori likes to grumble about it, but maybe he feels a certain responsibility, or at least he's had that responsibility thrust upon him by the others. The Bilbo caretaker. And it makes Bilbo sound kind of helpless a lot. And maybe to an extent he is a little helpless, but it's the disadvantages of being as short as he is. He's got short little legs, so he can't run as fast as the others, even if he was trying his very best. And he's got short little legs and arms, so he can't get up into the trees without a dwarf to use as a ladder. These are not what he's been brought along for. These aren't his specialty. Running from goblins and climbing into trees doesn't have too much to do with burglaring. I mean, climbing into trees could, but you should have tools for that, maybe. You feel that? Short little legs? Goblins riding wargs is a scary thought. Raiding towns to scoop people up in the night. And it's also kind of interesting how it seems to be sort of an alliance between the goblins and the wargs. Like, the wargs don't live with them in the mountains. The wargs have their own clan out in the woods in the valley. And they just have an alliance with the goblins where they work together occasionally. So I think that's probably a good amount of reading for tonight. Short little legs, like you like your creature comforts. You relate to hobbits. Yeah, I mean, I can feel that. I like to be cozy in my home. Sometimes a little bit of an adventure can be a nice thing, but just as the exception, not the rule. I don't like to be adventuring all the time. So yeah, we finally gotten back on track for finishing one of these streams actually on a chapter. The next chapter goes from we're now on page 142 is where we're at. The next chapter goes all the way to page 174, so it's a long one. So we might end up partway through again. We'll have to decide for the next stream. Something else that I was kind of talking about on the last one, but Erica wasn't here for that. What does everyone think about the current schedule? Like, we have been doing Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So far, I think Wednesdays are probably the least convenient for people. Like the last Wednesday, we had definitely less people showing up. So, do you guys think that I should stick to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays? Or would you be happy if I cut out the Wednesdays and just did Mondays and Fridays? I would love to know everyone's opinions because I can do either. Like, I enjoy doing the stream, but it doesn't feel... It feels a little strange just reading to myself if there aren't people here to hang out and talk about the book. So, what would everyone prefer? Do you like the current schedule, or should we make adjustments? The Sharkies are good either way. You don't have a preference? Barb would prefer Mondays and Fridays only. You don't. You think we should cut out the Wednesdays? What about Erica and Robot Kyo? Monday and Friday is good for you. Okay. To be honest, 3 times a week is a lot for you, but you heard streamers need to do like 4 hours per week or something for the algorithm. To be honest, I haven't been paying too much attention to the algorithm as far as things go. I could probably try and advertise a lot more. And for your own selfish reasons, when your courses start next month, you'll be busy both Monday and Wednesdays, so missing any less would be nice. All right. So far, we've got 3 votes for going to Mondays and Fridays, and 1 abstain. Although, I mean, the Sharkies, I think, should each get a vote. You know. I mean, is it 1 vote per account, or is it 1 vote per person? Yeah, as far as actually making this stream more of a thing, like, I haven't gone. I post basically when I let my friends know, and I post on Facebook, and I haven't gone to like Reddit or anything like that. Robokyo thinks per person vote. Alright, well, maybe we will skip this Wednesday then. Does that sound good to everybody? We'll do our next one on Friday. Give everyone a little bit of a break. And then we can always adjust things later if everyone's schedules are shifting and things like that. Of course, starting next month with Robokyo. That's exciting. Alright. Well, I think that's good for tonight. We've been here for an hour. A little bit over an hour at this point. Good chapter. Good half a chapter. The next one is a little longer. It is an interesting chapter, but maybe partially less dangerous. Well, maybe there's some danger. Some collective nodding here. Okay. Alright. Alright, well, have a good night, everybody. Love the song. Alright. I guess that's probably the most sort of sing-song one I did, even if it was still kind of more of a goblin chant. Very boring fetch quests in Ni no Kuni. Okay. Well, have a good week. Since we won't be here on Wednesday, I'll see you all on Friday at the end of the week. We'll see you at the beginning, and then we'll see you at the end. Have a good night, everyone. Bye. See you next time.